Welcome to the real, not the fake, the real
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson.
He's in back of
Episode.
me there. I'm in Pavilion 7, one of the rooms, Pavilion 7. And we got a replication of Houdon's bust of Thomas Jefferson in the background.
Oh, and your backgrounds are so good. They look so real. So this is episode 20. And we will discuss Thomas Jefferson's lifelong feud with Alexander Hamilton. But as we know, they weren't feuding all the time. They actually worked together to do things for the United States.
Once in a while, yeah.
Yeah, every once in a while. But it's fun to have feuding founding fathers. Oh, the triple F, feuding founding fathers.
Got to watch
Oh, that would be a great show.
I think we already have that.
Oh gosh. Okay, so before we get started, I do want to mention that Dr. Holacek is the world's foremost authority on the mind of Thomas Jefferson. As you can, if you want to learn more, you can look into 28 of his published books on Thomas Jefferson. So what qualifies him?
And if you don't believe that extravagant claim, just ask me. I'll reinforce that. I'll confirm it for you.
And over 225 essays. That's what brought us together, is one of your essays on Thomas Jefferson on education. So
we haven't done education in a long time. We got to get back to that.
Oh, that's a good idea. I
was just thinking about, we haven't done that in a long time. So, by the way, we're doing Hamilton because one of the members of Abbeville, the institute for which I write frequently, asked that I turn to do something on Hamilton.
Okay.
We're doing it this week. That's why we're going to be doing something else. But that said, if any of our viewers have any suggestions for further shows, just give us a let us know.
Yes, you can like, share, write in the comments if you have any ideas for shows. We would be happy to consider your suggestions. Okay, so regarding Thomas Jefferson's lifelong feud with Alexander Hamilton, we're going to first start off with the entrance of Monticello. You're greeted by a bust of Jefferson facing a bust of Alexander Hamilton, opposed in death as in life, both by Italian sculptor Giuseppe Ceracchi. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, it's pretty darn good.
Ceracchi. The statue of Hamilton is life-size, while the statue of Jefferson is larger. And that suggests not merely Jefferson's opposition, but political victory over Hamilton. What were the reasons for the opposition? In this version of the real Thomas Jefferson, we answer that question. But first, a word on the aim of the show. I have to have that drama. The real Thomas Jefferson, and this is different from our One Word 5 Questions show. A little bit. The similarity is you do all the talking.
A lot of bits. We do. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Since publication of Merrill D. Peterson's groundbreaking manuscript, The Jefferson Image in the American Mind, nearly all Jeffersonian biographers take it upon themselves to write of Jefferson's protean nature or Janus-facedness. What Jefferson says most often cannot be understood literally. His prose must then be deconstructed, and so intuitiveness and knack are needed in preference to logical acumen. One scholar who spent a career writing on Jefferson said that Jefferson simply cannot be known. It is commonplace to call the man a contradiction, as if a person can have the property of a necessarily false sentence. This shows aim to dispel that myth. Jefferson can be known, and logic, not intuitive deconstruction, is the method. I feel like I know him, or like if I met him, if he were to come back to life and I would be able to speak with him tomorrow, I would feel like I know him. And I would be able to finish his sentences and know what he's thinking.
Yeah, that's what happens when you do him for a while. You start to get to know them. I feel the same way.
Well, because there's only so many combinations of personalities and of human behavior. I mean, human behavior is pretty predictable. And once you start to see the different types of wiring and understand how they work, I don't know. It all becomes.
Yeah, Jefferson in my book, where I do a psychobiography, it's called Thomas Jefferson's Psychobiography of American Lion. I do a psychoanalytic study of Jefferson, and my conclusion, of course, is that he's massively sublimated and horribly anal. Anal is a person who's perfectly ordered. Everything is done ritually the same way. His daily routine had to be the same or roughly the same when circumstances allowed, and everything's clean, neat, and that's why he was just so unbelievably successful in all the things that he did. But yeah.
I have to say the one word I would use to describe Thomas Jefferson is a chameleon.
Oh God, no, I don't think so. No.
Well, only when the reason I say that, I'll tell you why I say that. Because I noticed when he's corresponding with Benjamin Rush and the strong Christians, his wording is much different than when he's corresponding with other people.
Yeah, that's what Peter Ono said in some sense, that Jefferson corresponds with people on their own terms. And I'll grant you that. Doesn't mean you're a chameleon. You're a chameleon in a sense if you're doing it duplicitously, if you're doing it to deceive.
Oh,
he's not. No, he's doing it because
he's out of respect,
yes, that there's a difference.
Right.
When other people
to adapt his words and his message to the respect to whom he's writing.
The interests of the person with whom he's writing.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do something on AH today, right?
Yeah. You know what? Maybe one of these days we need to have the real Thomas Jefferson, just random casual conversation about Jefferson. That would be a great show.
Well, what we could do is field comments or questions from the viewers and just answer them in a show.
Yeah, that would be
if great. We get them.
Put your questions together about Jefferson. Even if you know us and you're friends with us, please, and we've answered your question already, please send us a question because we can put them all together to create a show that we're having this kind of casual discussion about Thomas Jefferson. Because I love talking about the founders until they started becoming president, and then forget it.
We're down to 5 minutes, right?
Oh boy. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm not allowed to talk anymore. Okay. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is, who was Alexander Hamilton? And can you tell us a bit about the man and his life? And I'd also like to know if you could include, and we can calculate it now, his age, because I think that's very important when we're talking about Alexander Hamilton and the way he thought. We need to know his age at that time because he was significantly younger than many of the other founding fathers.
Well, 11 and a half to 12 years difference between Hamilton and Jefferson. He was born in 1755, died just before his 50th birthday. You know how he died, with the pistol feud with Aaron Burr. Burr shot him and killed him. Anyways, he was always a very ambitious person. We're going to go over one of the quotes that Jefferson found illustrative or characteristic of the man. And he wanted early on to distinguish himself through his military exploits. So when he was in the Continental Army from, I think, 1778, I believe, and he was in it all the way to 1791, so for a few years. And he did distinguish himself in battles, so much so that he captured the attention of George Washington, and he became lieutenant colonel under Washington. By the way, I think all my years in Virginia, 6 years, and with the 2 years in Texas, I deserve the ranking of the title colonel, Colonel Hollis. And if you're a Southerner and you write Southern history and biography, you deserve the rank of colonel. From what I gather, all you really need for that is to be, a sufficient amount of wealth, which I don't have, is to own something and be a planter. Some have a plantation. I don't have a plantation, but I have a garden, so it qualifies me. But anyways, he distinguishes himself in the Battle of Princeton in 1787, early on in the war, gains the notice of Washington, as I said. He would be an important figure in moving intelligence between the generals. So he had won the attention of many of the foremost, generals in the Continental Army. He leaves in 1791. Where he's not getting the sort of notoriety attention that he wants, from what I can gather. Goes back to New York and gets involved in investments and things like that. Founds the Bank of New York. He gets married to a gal by the name of Elizabeth Schuyler. And this is done early on in 1780, right? He would marry her in 1781. He meets her in 1780. And for someone who was avowedly a very, devout Presbyterian, he was be sexually involved in two of Elizabeth's sisters. So he would, not only was he involved with his wife sexually, he was involved with their sisters when the opportunity availed itself for him, from what I can gather. So one of the things we note about him is that he is an opportunist. And the opportunities that he seeks are generally opportunities to advance his own status, his own welfare, right?
Well, okay. Well, are we basing that on having the affairs with his?
That and then many other things.
Well, it takes two.
His investing. Well, in this case,
I mean, unless it's a matter of rape. I mean, they were.
No, it takes other people. But I mean, a woman had a lot to lose by engaging in affairs with, in some sense, it wasn't becoming of a man, but it's still like it is today. When a man has affairs, he can sit there among other men and brag about them. If a woman has affairs with men outside of wedlock and so forth, she's shamed, and so a woman has a lot to lose.
Sisters were the opportunists.
I don't know. I mean, I'm just stating a fact that he had affairs with sisters, but judging from his personality, from what I know of his personality, he's the sort of guy that wanted something, he went for it. So, we know he died just before his 50th when he had the duel. And of course, I needn't tell you, he was in George Washington's administration, the secretary of the treasurer. And he was part of Washington's cabinet with general, and they had ample opportunities to lock horns. And we'll talk about that in a bit. So that's all we need to talk about with Alexander Hamilton. Not a Hamiltonian scholar, but that's enough.
I know. I still haven't chosen who I would want to be a scholar. I know you had suggested Thomas Jefferson, but I could never match you.
So who wants to match anybody? You just do what you enjoy doing.
Well, actually, the next question leads to.
I think you should do Spiro Agnew or Millard Fillmore.
This is the person that I would love to learn more about, because I don't know if there is much available, but Benjamin Rush, in a letter to Benjamin Rush.
There's a lot on Benjamin Rush. He's not as well studied as, but he's an interesting person too.
Yeah, that would be somebody I would consider. In a letter dated January 16th, 1811, Jefferson mentions two singular incidents that shed light on Alexander Hamilton's character. Tell us about them.
These are really fascinating stories because, psychologically speaking, and I'm very interested in psychology of history. Jefferson, I mean, these stories, if Jefferson is not stretching the truth, and there's no reason to think he is, tell us everything we need to know about Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton. Now, first is a dinner in New York City in, I think, 1790. Jefferson comes back from his tour, his 5-year stint in France, and he dinners with Hamilton and John Adams at his residence in New York City. And they sit down and they talk about constitutions, the U.S. Constitution, so forth, the existing constitutions. And John Adams says, according to Jefferson, purge that constitution, the English Constitution, of its corruption, and give it to its popular branch equality of representation, it would be the most perfect constitution ever devised by the wit of man. You like my Cossack pipe, by the way?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That looks like you.
Thank God. Yeah, I'm not very good looking, am I guess?
Yes,
Anyways,
you are.
then Hamilton says, purge the British Constitution of its corruption and give to its popular branch equality of representation, it would become an impractical government as it stands at present with all its supposed defects. It's the most perfect government which ever existed. So what that tells you is that both are Anglophiles, both love England, not France. Jefferson is a Francophile. But Adams recognizes that the British Constitution and the way they practice politics needs some polishing, needs some cleanup. Hamilton says, no, the corruptions are needed. And what that tells you is that both have sort of pessimistic views of the average human being. Jefferson does not. And we go back and we talk about the political differences, Hamilton and Jefferson. They are based on different views of human beings. Jefferson thinks that all people are equal and at least morally equal in terms of having the same amount of same quality of moral sensibility. Hamilton doesn't get into the moral aspects, just thinks most people are morons and that government has to move in the direction of managing the affairs of the average citizens because they can't manage their own affairs. Okay, that's incident one. We've got this talk of constitutions. It bespeaks, I think, much concerning Hamilton's views of corruption in government, that there needs to be, and of interpreting constitutions, right? You can interpret them rather willowy. Okay, this is my favorite. The room, there's a collection of portraits, and on the wall you see, I've talked this before, Francis Bacon, John Locke, and Isaac Newton. Newton is the foremost, one of the foremost figures in the world. Locke is easily recognized as a great political philosopher and a great philosopher from England, empiricist. Newton's an empiricist, and so is Francis Bacon, that precedes them all. These three of the great men. In Hamilton, Jefferson says, the room being hung around with a collection of the portraits of remarkable men. Among them were those of Bacon, Newton, and Locke. And Jefferson will have those portraits painted and put up in Monticello. Hamilton asked me who they were. I told him that they were my trinity of the three greatest men the world has ever produced, naming them. Hamilton paused for some time, and he says, the greatest man that ever lived was Julius Caesar. Now, this blows Jefferson's mind. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know. And he says, Adams was honest as a politician as well as a man. Hamilton, honest as a man, but as a politician, believing in the necessity of either force or corruption to govern men. Now, what that tells you is that Jefferson's heroes are philosophers and scientists. It'd be like someone today, asking, if I asked you who's your favorite person, your hero, and you said, well, Albert Einstein, that would tell me a lot about you. You're interested in physics, the way the world works, the mind of God, and so forth. And he's interested in a conqueror, an emperor. And that goes back to his ambitions as a soldier, wanting to establish himself as a military hero in the Revolutionary War.
Well, then he should have beat Aaron Burr in the duel.
Well, he should have, yeah.
Right?
Why don't you tell him that?
I mean, if he was that interested in being a conqueror, you would think he would have been able to win the.
Well, maybe Aaron Burr too. Maybe Aaron Burr was just a bigger asshole. I don't know.
Oh gosh.
What do you want me to say? I mean, those are the two singular incidents. And why they're very, very fascinating to me is because they tell you a lot about Jefferson. Those sorts of things to me as a historian, as a scholar, tell me everything I need to. Sometimes I say about people, sometimes a person can utter one sentence and I catch them when they utter it with utmost sincerity, and it tells me everything I need to know about that person without further inquiring into the nature of that person. Something slips out and you think, oh, I know who you are. There's nothing you can say from now on that's going to change my mind. Doesn't happen often, but sometimes.
Oh, oh gosh. Well, I'm not going to speak anymore.
No, but I mean, isn't this when the greatest person ever lived is Julius Caesar? Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know about Hamilton?
Uh,
He's gonna he's gonna take what he wants by force. If he wants something, he's gonna get it, and he's gonna get it by forcing it. No negotiation, military con. That's the sort of guy Hamilton was. I really believe that.
well, at least he didn't say King George.
Well, King George lost his mind later on.
No, I'm joking. Okay, so yeah, that would have been bad. The next question. So how did the feud begin between Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton?
Well, Jefferson comes back from France late in 1789, and he's getting himself acclimated to political matters. And at some point, let's go on to George Washington. We'll pick. He gets an invitation from George Washington at some point to be his Secretary of State. Jefferson demurs. He objects. I don't want to do that, but he really wants to go back to France. He thinks the Revolutionary War is going to be over quickly. It's not. But he reluctantly, grudgingly accepts the post as as Washington's Secretary of State. Washington will have Jefferson as Secretary of State. Hamilton, Secretary of Treasury. This is a very distinguished, intelligent man. Henry Knox is Secretary of War, another important person, and Edmund Randolph as Attorney General. So you've got a mix of highly intelligent people with diverse backgrounds from both northern and southern states, two from the north, two from the south. And it shows you a lot about whatever you want to say about Washington. And here's a man that really trying to pick the best possible, what we call today as cabinet, the best possible cabinet that he can. Now, once the war is over, the individual states, right, are massively in debt because they had been, gleaning money from investors to be able to fight the war, right, to get, supplies for the Continental Army and so forth. And they are in debt to the tune of at least 21 million clamatos. It's a lot of clamatos, right? One estimate is as high as 25 million. Anyways, so they're in. So Hamilton is trying to convince Jefferson, something called assumption, that pay off that debt. He's got a plan. So he meets with Jefferson, and then later he'll meet with Jefferson and James Madison, and he discusses this plan that, okay, the federal government, through selling outright investments, selling out bonds to wealthy investors, will pay off what the states owe, right? So the states are going to be happy, okay? They owe many, many millions of clamatos, right, to the investors. So we'll pay off in effect, the state's debt, right? And by selling these bonds to investors, who's going to buy them? Wealthy people. And they will pay back, the investors through increased tariffs and taxes and things like that. So the investors are going to be happy. Now, what happens is that the people who had initially invested in the war are going to be, the investment they made, for every, say, dollar that they put in, they're going to be given back a small percentage of that. So they're not happy. The people that are buying bonds, people like Alexander Hamilton, by the way, are going to be getting paid back everything that they asked for. So they're going to be making a pretty penny. So the idea is that these bonds are going to pay off the state's debts. One of the problems with that is many of the southern states already were in the process of paying off all that they owed. Virginia, for example, owned virtually nothing left. They almost paid off. So paying off, assuming states' debts, is not going to help the South too much. It's going to help the North, which is, so it's a proposition that doesn't help the South all that much, right? It sounds nice. Why is he going to do this? Through increased tariffs, increased federal taxes. The federal government's going to inherit the debt, right, and pay it off through increased taxes and tariffs. And the people who buy these bonds are the wealthy from the northern industrial states right? And they're going to be investing in the government. So what we have is we have plutocracy. People with wealth are investing in the government. They want to see the government succeed. And if, it's tit for tat. If I'm investing in the government owes me something back.
Well, it's the same way today. Well, that's why we have
Absolutely.
lobbyists.
It's always been the same way. But the point is that, Hamilton is, Jefferson doesn't see this really, that this is going on. Okay. Now, people like Hamilton, and Hamilton's going to be involved in this process up to his nose. And, the Northern Industrialists are going to be making a handsome profit on this. And it's going to increase the power, like I said, a plutocracy, government based on wealth. A lot of political power is going to be in the hands of people that, that have bought bonds with vis-a-vis the federal government. So, Jefferson is not initially happy with that. He says, I'll read a couple of quotes. He says, the pill would be a bitter one to the southern states. Remember, because I said they're not going to gain much from it. They paid a lot of their debts. Something should be done to soothe them that the removal of the seat of government to the Potomac was a just measure and would probably be a popular one with them. It would be proper one to follow the assumption. So in other words, if we're going to assume that the government's going to get states, pay off the states' debts, right? What we have is we have a federal government debt because the federal government has this massive debt, right? It's getting involved in states' affairs. It has invested in states, so government gets bigger. We work towards a Bank of the United States. We work towards federal debt. We work towards some of the things are good here because we're going to have credit with respect to other nations if we need to borrow, right? Because we're establishing credit history. But Jefferson doesn't want any of this. He wants laissez-faire. Leave us alone. Let's not get involved in other affairs. Let's just be farmers and not worry about all this big government and investing and getting involved in other affairs across the pond, across the Atlantic. Okay, and Jefferson writes again, it was unjust in itself, oppressive to the states, and was acquiesced in merely from a fear of discussion. While our government was still in its most infant state, it enabled Hamilton so to strengthen himself by corrupt services to many that he could afterwards carry his bank scheme and every measure he proposed in defiance of all opposition. In fact, it was a principal ground whereon was reared up that speculation phalanx in and out of Congress, which has since been able to give laws to change the political complexion of the government of the United States. We are going to have a big, massive, massified government. Right? It's going to become massive, plump, big, pregnant, and it's going to have all sorts of powers. And then, of course, Hamilton's going to push for rather protean, or what do I want to say, versatile interpretations of the Constitution, because the president's not going to be chained by the Constitution. He's going to have the power to do what he wants to do because he presumably is smarter than everybody else, right? Mm-hmm. So does that make sense? That the whole scheme behind here is this whole notion of paying off the state's debts is making the federal government an important entity. It's going to assume the debt. And then the investors are going to invest in this federal government. We're going to have a fat federal government. The federal government's going to start getting powers it wasn't supposed to have. And Hamilton's right in the middle of all this, right? After the war, for example, those lands to the west that were owned by England are now lands owned by the colonists and by the United States. And, there's going to be a lot of investment in those lands where they push the Indians out of those lands. And, we're going to have a lot of wealthy investors invest in land schemes, defrauding the Indians out of land, stuff like that. So I hope that makes sense. I have no idea what I just said, but I hope it makes sense.
I don't know. I just woke up.
All right, you did. Well, I have my Quasac peace pipe here, so.
Okay, so the last thing I want to ask you, I want to end with the statues by Ceracchi.
Well, we haven't talked about, one of the things we should talk about, is this notion of how this led to political parties.
Yes.
Let's discuss that.
Okay.
Because what happens here is with Hamilton pushing for I'll call it massified, using a word somewhat unusual, fat federal government, a
Yeah.
national bank, a strong presidency, and so forth, and getting involved fully in European affairs, we have two parties formed.
Right.
We have the Federalists of Hamilton, and Hamilton starts writing all these sort of scurrilous essays in Federalist papers like the Gazette of the United States by Fenno. And at some point, Jefferson's not taking too kindly to this. So he has Madison and other people write responses to these Federalist attacks, these attacks on him. And he publishes in Freneau's Republican paper called National Gazette. Now, what happens, as a matter of fact, is these attacks on Jefferson sort of crystallize Hamilton's vision of what proper government is, and Jefferson's opposition to Hamilton sort of crystallized Jefferson's mind what government should be: government of and by the people, right? Demassified, thin government, a president who follows the Constitution strictly. Two parties will form, right? So Hamilton worked by force and incentivization. And for the most part, the incentives were incentives to the wealthy people, because if the wealthy people are doing well, the country economically will be doing well because they're the ones investing in it. Notice how we're keeping out the hoi polloi, the many. Jefferson's view is that the government should be of and by the people, and it's for the people, right? All people involved as much as they can, as fully as they can, through elected representatives, overseeing them and recalling them if they have to. People qualified for that because they have enough rationality and they have equal moral sensibility, right? So Hamilton is looking at his political vision is economic, built on federal debt, a Bank of the United States, building up credit, interaction with nations of Europe. Jefferson is hands-off, small government, no bank, no debt, pay off debt. Jefferson says to George Washington, 1793, he says, "No man more ardently intent to see the public debt soon and sacredly paid off than I am." This exactly marks the difference between Colonel Hamilton. Hamilton was a colonel, right? Colonel Hamilton's views and mine, that I would wish the debt paid tomorrow. He wishes it never to be paid, but always to be a thing wherewith to corrupt and manage the legislature. Now, the problem is Jefferson, like Aristotle, millennia before him, don't want to say he didn't understand usury. Usury is making money on money. We do it all the time today. And when you think about that, it's the way global economics works. But Aristotle hated it. You should be making money on labor or productivity, not making money on money. When you make money on money, you usually do it to someone's disadvantage. You're giving out loans at exorbitant rates or something like that. People are buying bonds to invest in the government, and there's a risk involved, right? Jefferson hated that. He thought paper money, this sort of stuff, was always gambling. All right, you want to get to the last question, right? I can't hear you.
That was the last one.
No, you went to the statues.
Yeah, that was the last question.
Just read it up again, and I'll bring up the statues. We can look at them and talk. If you have anything to say, please do. I'll put up screen share, and I'll bring up the pictures.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Did they come? They didn't come up yet, did they? Okay, hold on.
No.
Should be coming up now. All right, see these pictures of the statues by Ceracchi. Are they clear enough or no?
Yeah, they're small.
Yeah, I mean, they're fairly large busts. The one of Jefferson is larger than the one of Hamilton.
No, I mean small on the screen. Do you have like the downloaded picture, the pictures you used?
No, I didn't do that. I can do this. How's that?
Oh, yeah. And then scroll. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
And,
Teacher Donna, blah,
I'm
blah,
going
blah.
to.
Is that good enough for you, Donna? Is that all right?
Well, yeah, my vision is going.
Any observations you have on
But
just looking?
if you'll notice my picture, I have little watches scrolling.
Yes,
See?
you have plenty of time.
Well, yeah, we have 4 minutes and 33 seconds left.
All right.
Okay.
Anything you want to say about these? Both by Ceracchi.
Well, the noses are still intact.
It is.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
The question is, do they look like they're done by the same person?
The only reason I would say, probably not. Possibly because of the pedestal that the bust is on, even though one is thinner.
To me, they just don't even look like they're done by the same person. Of course, Jefferson's doesn't look anything like him if we judge by the other depictions and busts.
Yeah, he looks like he needs some more weight on him. And there's much more detail on Jefferson.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. There's so much detail. It's almost like the project with Hamilton was unfinished. Look at the eyes of Jefferson, the brows, the nose, the
you could see that, the face looks almost real.
And the hair.
Yeah.
It doesn't look much like Jefferson. Jefferson here he's almost got like a morose, maybe gloomy look. He's got the Roman garb. Jefferson always hated that. And Washington did too. It almost doesn't look like the same person to me.
The other one's supposed to be Hamilton?
Yeah. A little bit of resemblance to Hamilton, I think. And, it's almost like an underdeveloped piece. And, but it shows a sort of, if you look at the eyes, the brows, and the mouth, am I right to say it looks sort of cocky?
Yeah.
Slightly arrogant, very confident. I'm looking at the eyes and the brows and the mouth. And to me, it looks like, and I'm not judging this from what we said about, it just looks like someone who's sort of a little cocky. Yeah, I can do the job. I like it. It just seems a little underdeveloped. Jefferson doesn't look anything like him. And unlike all the other statues and pictures, he's got the long neck.
Mm-hmm.
There's the tension in the neck. He doesn't necessarily look confident as he does in the other ones. He doesn't necessarily look intelligent, I don't think, in this piece. It doesn't look like the other busts of Jefferson. It doesn't look like any of the paintings of Jefferson. But there's a lot of interesting detail. I mean, you have anything to add to that, or?
No. The one on the right, Hamilton is very bland and plain, whereas the one of Jefferson has a lot of detail. But maybe this is unfinished. Could that be the case?
No, I don't think so. But the thing is, Jefferson's is almost overdone. Hamilton's gives us too little information, right? And Jefferson's bust gives us too much information. It gives us so much information that it might be that we'll get a misleading depiction of Jefferson, I think, from looking at it. Yeah, and why Jefferson chose this bust. But when you come in, you read the quote early on in your intro. What did you say? Enemies, not enemies. What did you say? The first quote?
Opposed in death as in life?
Yes, and he didn't hate Hamilton. There's mutual respect here.
Right.
They're staring at each other. They just had political differences. Hamilton was greedy, ambitious. Jefferson wasn't like that. But I think this suggests that they were politically opposed, but there was some respect there. All right, I haven't a clue what we're going to do next week as usual, but we're always going to be doing something.
I know you keep shooting down my ideas, so.
Well, they have to be about Jefferson. You're taking us into the 22nd century, actually, or something like that.